I was quite a little bit afraid yesterday when someone said that they didn't see the changes that were happening there. And I would like to say to this person, be careful, because it sounds like the first slide I'm putting up over here, what's called running to survive. And it says, every morning in Africa, a gazelle wakes up. It must outrun the fastest lion or it will be killed. Every morning in Africa, a lion wakes up. It must outrun the slowest gazelle or it will starve. It doesn't matter whether you are a lion or a gazelle. When the sun comes up, you better be running. So, this is a warning to all of you that say, it's no time to wait anymore. So, sorry? Okay. Today we are going to talk about community, and William will line it out in a perfect way. But the idea of community is an ancient idea. A man has evolved and civilization has matured. The nature of community has evolved too. And in 1980, the futurist Alvin Toffler, I think you also know the man who launched the book The Third Wave, and was he ever right? He introduced the concept of waves of changes in his book The Third Wave. He described the waves of change that arise and build on the previous waves. And if you think about those waves, he described them as follows. The first wave was the wave of change, was based on the agricultural revolution. It's essentially, it has actually ended, and it actually doesn't play no longer a factor in society today. There is still, of course, agriculture is still important, but as a wave, it doesn't count anymore. Then the second wave of change emerged coincidental with the Industrial Revolution. This wave is rooted in materialism and the supremacy of man. And this orientation gives rise to a stress on competition, self-preservation, and consumption. And this in turn, Toffler argues, led to such current problems as pollution, solid waste disposal, crime, family violence, and international terrorism. So this wave is still an active force in our society. And the key concept of the second wave was and still is, we are separate and we must compete with one another to survive. And then we got a third wave of change, which is a new force in society. It's manifesting and growing, but there is a growing concern for balance and sustainability. And as a result, we are becoming more sensitive to the issues of conservation, the sanctity of life, and cooperation. The key concept of the third wave is, we connect and must cooperate. Sounds more moving in the right direction, right? And now we discover the fourth wave. And this wave has been described by Herman Bryant, Maynard, and Susan Mertens in the recent book, The Fourth Wave, Business in the 21st Century. In the fourth wave of change, the central foci of our society will be on the integration of all dimensions of life, so integration, and our responsibility for the whole, the holistic approach as we talk about. The key concept in the fourth wave is likely to be, we are one and choose to co-create. So it's quite a new concept. Maynard and Mertens have identified 7 trends that they believe will underlie the emergence of a new worldview. And let's take a look at those 7 trends. Trend number 1 is a shift in consciousness. Perhaps the most fundamental change is a shift in consciousness where people start to realize that they are the creators of their own realities. So we are the creators of our own realities. This is a crucial step towards self-actualization, accountability, and empowerment, what I spoke about the last days. But this confirms also that not only we talk about that, but it is really a trend in society. So I think we're on the right track there. Many people have had transformative experiences, such as life-changing dreams, inward journeys that reveal new vistas, near-death experiences, and instances of intuitive knowing. And don't we all become more aware that our intuition is developing more and more? These experiences have led to realize that they are more than their physical body and their logical mind. They realize through personal experience that there are levels of reality beyond the physical senses. As a result, more and more people are placing emphasis on the interconnectedness of everyone and everything, and they affirm the central role of inner wisdom and authority. So it's quite a trend that is taking place. More and more people are also in terms of group thinking. So trend number 2 is disenchantment with scienticism. Ever since science has liberated itself from religion, following the Copernican revolution, those with a spiritual worldview have been marginalized. But in the fourth wave, there is a growing disenchantment with scienticism, the tendency to reduce all reality and experience to mathematical descriptions of physical and chemical phenomena. There is also a growing awareness that feelings, intuition, and other non-rational processes complement reason in the search for knowledge and understanding. That's the second trend. The third trend, new inner sources of authority and power. A new appreciation of authority from within is being expressed by the desire of many persons to live and work to their full capacity. People are exhibiting increasing reluctance to have others make their decisions for them or to determine how they are to live and work. Power is devolving from institutions to individuals. In the fourth wave, we are likely to decide for ourselves how we will live and work and take steps to ensure that our institutions serve us, not demand us, but serve us. Trend number 4, re-spiritualizing of our society. Many in the Western world are responding to the lack of sense of balance, purpose, and personal power by bringing spirituality into their lives and work. More and more people are becoming engaged in a search for and means to express such things as purpose, inner authority, and peace, truth, love, compassion, self-worth, dignity, wisdom, a higher powers, and a sense of unity with others. Our church is taking the lead in this re-spiritualization of society. Indeed, it seems like we are destined to do so. So we are really on the lead of the fourth wave. Trend number 5, decline in materialism. We have begun to see a basic reorientation of values from competition to cooperation, from exploitation to caring, from materialism to spirituality, honesty, truth, courage, conviction, self-worth, relationships and personal fulfillment. People are saying they do not want to work just to make money. They want to create value. Trend number 6, political and economic democratization. Oppressed peoples of the world, the East, West and South, are demanding greater political freedom and economic opportunity. And the bells are ringing harder and harder. And it sounds like the revolution, the French Revolution at the time. If we are not going to pay attention to that, something might explode somewhere one day. There is also a growing campaign to create economic democracy worldwide. Trend number 7, moving beyond nationality. The first step in this emerging trend is to make the intellectual shift from wanting to be the competition to wanting to serve the world. The second step is likely to be taken by organizations that are already operating globally. They can assume a leadership role by thinking globally and acting locally. In practice, the only way this can be done is by applying the concept of steering and rowing for big organizations. The third step is emerging as organizations are becoming communities that extend beyond employees to encompass their families as well. This integration of work and family life will be crucial to the success of organizations. So people in the end will not make a distance anymore. Families are part of the organization, are part of the way of thinking, and will be considered. A new concept of community also needs a new concept of community member. In my opening address I talked about self-actualization, freedom and accountability. As you know, I am convinced that self-actualization is a key step on the spiritual path. A self-actualized person uses the unlimited resources of self to serve others. And he or she does this and transcends himself or herself. The self-actualized servant of society is the key to building community. both as futurists see community and as Almorias see community. A new concept of community also calls for a new kind of leader, a servant leader. Again, in my opening address, I talked about leadership and mentioned that Jesus exhorted his disciples to be servant leaders. Well, Jesus was not the only great figure from the past to talk about servant leadership. So did Lao Tzu, who said, "A leader is one who serves." Everything we say or do sends a message, sends a tone, or teaches people what to do or what not to do. Gandhi once said, "There are my people. I am their leader. I must follow them." These are good words for today, but there are better. There are my people. I must serve them and serve them wisely. A good place to start is by asking them what they want and what they need. As I mentioned yesterday, we did surveys and I facilitated meetings with teaching center and study group leaders. And so did William, and so did Deborah, and so did many of our people. So let's take a look to the results of those overheads, the results of those surveys. First survey, we have been listening. In 1995, this first survey conducted at a July class, we sent a mail to about 8,500 members, and you people wanted to contact the church. There were also 8 focus groups conducted in Minneapolis and Los Angeles. In 1966, we had 5 surveys conducted in the New Year's class, and we had 7 focus groups in the New Year's class as well. In 1997, we had focus groups conducted in Sacramento, in the regional conference, then teaching center and study groups, focus groups conducted at the Easter class, 5 surveys conducted at the July class, 6 focus groups conducted at the July class, a listening yearbook in the July class and a North Fall class, and 5 re-energizing focus groups conducted worldwide at the North Fall class. So as you can see, we have been listening and listening and listening to what your needs are. And today we know surely what they are, and we start to work them in. Now, what are the top needs for the seekers? What came out was opportunity to rebuild community, understanding the process of lifelong learning for enhanced spirituality and achieving of one's spiritual potential. I think Deborah yesterday explained very well what we are going to do in that direction, and William will talk about the first one. Feeling strengthened through my communion with God. How to sustain my connection to life, humanity, nature. You see, we are creating more balance, or trying to create more balance in your life. You have to do it still, but a deeper understanding of religious mysteries. Heightened understanding of my divine plan. Motivation to be love in action. That's what we call spiritual, practical spirituality. A sense of contribution to my community, fellowship, and opportunities for service. Then some priorities in terms of structure and management. Open communication with headquarters, ongoing dialogue and listening to feedback. Just for information, I think you all know that we started an ongoing dialogue with teaching centers in Livingston and Bozeman. And so that, I think William will talk maybe a little more about it. Are you listening, William? Good. Then partnership with headquarters, participative community decision making, autonomy, local elections of group board members, improved membership structure to meet the needs of new seekers, headquarters type sharing with local groups. Other priorities, absolutely family and children, Sunday school programs, Sunday services for families, youth ministry programs, religious education ministry for parents, child care and conferences and local services, and Ascended Masters religious products. So all these things are very clear. We have far more in-depth information, and we have clearly articulated the difference between seekers and actual members. And so it's very clear to us that there are quite some differences over there. So in a moment, and I see the room is getting more full, William is going to lay out a proposal for community building, and I have tried to provide some context to this presentation. So there's one question I'd like to ask you before I invite William to speak, and that question is, why are we doing all these things? And the answer is, your needs and the forces of history are pushing us in this direction. And most of all, we are certain that the Ascended Masters are moving us in this direction. We clearly feel the help of them every day. There's not a moment in a day in time that you don't feel that the Ascended Masters are standing there next to you or guiding you or telling you, let's move on guys, it's time, faster, faster, faster. So now I would like to invite William to give his presentation, and for people on the path, take your pens again and your books, because this is very important information that you have to know, and we need your feedback on this as well. Thank you very much.
Well, good morning, everyone. It's truly a blessing to be here today, because today is actually a day that has been a journey that started 20 years ago for me. And in the last 12 hours, I've actually had some major thinking going on and some revelations that have really solidified the importance of this day for me. This is a very special day, because I'd like to share with you one of these things that Gilbert just mentioned, which was a life-changing dream. To give you the context of this dream and what happened, I'd like to move back 20 years ago. I happened to be a senior in college. I was in Santa Barbara. And essentially, I had been out of religion for about 5 years. At the age of 16, I decided that religion was not for me. In fact, the reason I told my parents that I was no longer going to go to church was there were no more donuts being served at the end of the service. So you can see how strongly I was convicted to my religion and other things that led me away. And I was having a pretty good time in college, pretty good grades, great social life, having fun, playing volleyball. You know, Santa Barbara is very conducive to beach activity. And things were going along rather well. And in the winter of 1978, I began to have, in 1 week, a series of dreams. How many of you have ever had this kind of thing happen to you? One night you have a dream, the next night it picks up where it left off from the night before, and you're going, what is going on here? You kind of get disoriented a little bit because something deeper is going on. And this is in fact what happened to me this one particular week. It was kind of a 3-act play. There were 3 nights, 3 acts, 3 scenes, and 3 very dramatic events that took place in my life. The first night, now you have to remember this. I'm telling you this from the standpoint, I didn't even know who the masters were. I had no idea what the teachings were about. I had very little interest in religious types of things at the time. The first night, I found myself being taken up, essentially what I feel like in flying, and I could feel beings behind me nurturing me, talking to me, but would not allow me to look at them or see them, but they're just simply instructing me. And the first night, I was actually taken over a number of cities and places where there seemed to be a little chaos, darkness, etc. And I was asked simply to hold my hands out and to watch what would go on. So I held my hands out, and I could feel these beings behind me coursing through the light, through my body, down into these cities. Now, when I woke up, you have to remember these kind of dreams that were extremely vivid. I could remember every single detail, almost every single moment. You know, some dreams you're just scratching to remember one word of a dream that you have. This dream was very uncharacteristically vivid for me the following day. And I was very disoriented. I was going, my gosh, why? I don't even remember dreams, and here I am recounting a very specific event that was very powerful for me. What did this mean? What was this light thing coming out of me? Why am I up in the sky? Is this, what's going on here? So it put me in a deep state of contemplation. What does this all mean? The second night, things got a little heavier. First of all, it was kind of awe. I was in awe that somehow this next dream was a takeoff of the first night of what was going on, and God was showing me and telling me. How many of you actually seen the movie The Christmas Carol? You know, the old movie The Christmas Carol. You know, Scrooge. you know, and the spirits come back to him and they take him back, and they, you know, and then they take him into the future and said, you know, essentially this is what was going on. And I was getting this basic revelation that, look, what you do today is going to impact this world into the future. And so I get that message on the second night of this 3-act play. And it's the third night, though, that really changed me. And what occurred was the following. I found myself with a group of people, a very large group of people. And we were told to walk into the mountains. And I remember the scene vividly. We were all walking hand in hand. We were in silence. We were being very obedient to the word of the guidance that we were given. And we walked into the mountain. Now, in this part of the dream, which is very interesting, everything was blacked out. I remember going into the mountain with the people. We were told not to look back. Absolutely do not look back. Just move into the mountain and go forward. And what happened at the end of the dream that night was, I remember distinctly a reemergence from the mountain. And as we came from the mountain, we were looking upon a new heaven and a new earth. And the beauty of this was unbelievable. I had tears on my pillow when I woke up because I actually believed that God had showed me what the new age was and what it in fact could be at a physical level. Now, at the time when we were reemerging, as this scene was unfolding, everybody around me was having the same identical experience. It was like a telepathic communication about the fact that here it is. God has given this to you for your life, for your generations to come. Essentially, the earth was restored. I could feel the pristine nature, the beauty of God. The love was so powerful between this group of people that I was just so moved I was trying to figure out what was happening. And at that point, as I saw the earth and I felt this connection with the people, the earth, the beauty, everything was so pristine and clear and scoured clean. It was just a very holy moment. And I woke up, and that was essentially the end of that dream. I was very interested about wondering whether or not there was going to be a fourth act to this, because I was really into this kind of dreaming at this point. And today, I think, is the fourth act of my dream. And one of the things that I want to share with you is that last night, what happened? I, in fact, did not get any sleep last night because Gilbert said something that absolutely God wanted to reveal to me again, something very startling. And when Gilbert talked about new beginnings cannot start until the old is dealt with, it had a very profound impact on me, because as I reflect on the dream and I remember the instructions were, do not look back. There's a tendency, I think, to look back at the old and try to carry it forward into a new day. And in fact, in my dream, this was part of the initiation, that we could not take what was old and no longer useful into this new day. Now, the puzzle for me at the time, when I had this dream, which was, I was an engineer, I mean, I had to analyze this and figure this thing out. Why did God not tell me what was going on when we went into this mountain? That's what I wanted to know, because essentially I was feeling, and as a group of people when we were reemerging in the scene, was what we did in the mountain caused what we were seeing as we were experiencing what we were walking out and looking at and feeling. And that was completely, totally, there was no recall. I could not remember a thing. And I wondered, why did God not allow me to understand what was going on in the mountain? And I think that what we're going to begin to go on a journey today with in terms of community is, in fact, this period of being in the mountain that God wanted me to experience fully, consciously, and with the same people and the group of people that came out of that mountain. And that really that experience was a collective experience. It wasn't something that I could just have by myself. It, in fact, was the fact that the community had created this new day, this new heaven, and this new earth. So, as a backdrop to today, I wanted you to really realize that it is a special day, and I'm very grateful to be here with you to share what I think are really some of the fundamental opportunities that we have to really make a difference for the masters and to make a difference for this earth and our community and many generations to come. So the topic today is building community. And if you see the byline on the first overhead here, is building the Church of Divine Love. And in fact, we cannot build the Church of Divine Love unless we in fact build true community. So we're going to explore this concept in depth today. I'm going to be sharing with you many quotes from the Masters. We're going to be hearing some excerpts. We're going to really get into this whole concept. And where are we? Where are we as an organization? We have to take a very serious self-assessment as to where we are. Because if we don't know where we are, we will not understand what is the gap, how much creative tension there is between where we need to be and where we're going. So I'd like to share with you, first of all, a quote from the Maha Chohan from May 26, 1996. He says, "Let this community then number in the thousands, the hundreds of thousands, and the millions. What will it take, beloved? The slaying of pride and arrogance, coming into alignment with the laws of God, expanding the heart of love, taking wise dominion over one's entire state of mind and consciousness. It will take this, beloved. Notice then how the acceleration of Jesus Christ was able to bring in the multitudes, thousands upon thousands. You will know the thousands and the millions when you personally and individually find this unconditional love." I think this is a very important message from the Master with regards to the fact that our community and our growth is directly proportional to our personal mastery. And this is all in sync with the Master's teachings that we are really the ones that are accountable, we individually and we collectively, as we take the teachings and apply them to develop this mastery and this unconditional love. The next quote I'd like to share with you that ties into this very clearly and most recently was from Jesus just a year ago at the New Year's conference. Jesus said, "I, Jesus, commend you for the good and all effort and striving and many hours of service. I commend you for your vision. I commend you for your fearlessness to enter a new way of running this organization, of bringing people into a higher sense of their individualization of the God flame. The times are changing. You are on track. Keep on, beloved, for you are molding and remolding this organization and its members into a high-quality performance team that can work together, that can overcome individual idiosyncrasies and bring to the core of the center as the core of the central sun that essence, that intensity of fire that has burned within your temple since the beginning of time, as God has led you to this moment when there is ultimately no limit to what you can accomplish." Now, from time to time, as the Masters dictate, and I have the great opportunity to be working on staff, working with the executive board, I really have a very substantial blessing in my life, and that is that I get paid to research everything that's going on with regards to in strategic planning, in re-energizing, in community building. It's absolutely a miracle that this occurs. I'm supposed to be doing this, and this is the love of my life. And when you hear the Masters give this kind of inspiration and instruction, it just goes to the very soul of my being and understanding and confirming the direction that we're heading, where we are. This day is a day of destiny for us in this room and those of you that are on the patch worldwide. It is a day of destiny for this organization. We are not going to be the same in the coming years. We are going, in fact, growing into a brand new organization, going through another birthing cycle. And I think Jesus really points out clearly here a new way of running this organization. He doesn't say the same old way of running the organization. He tells us there is a new way, and it's our job to figure out that new way. And molding and remolding. He gives us an understanding that it is occurring and that it will continue. Remolding is an ongoing process. It just doesn't happen one time, here it is, here's the new deal, and it's over. It is a lifelong process. Community building is, in fact, a lifelong learning process. And then at the end, admonishing us and giving us the opportunity to understand that this is the moment that we must seize, that we must move forward, and deal with these individual idiosyncrasies. Now, I have to share with you the fact that Gilbert and I have gone out to a number of communities, teaching centers, study groups. And this issue of dealing with individual idiosyncrasies is problematic in our organization. And I submit to you that community building is something that will help us deal with Jesus' calling for us to do, is to overcome these individual idiosyncrasies. And we're going to explore that in a little bit more in detail. Now, as we move forward, I'd like to share with you some information from Scott Peck. How many of you have actually heard of Scott Peck? And Scott Peck has written a number of books that are pretty significant with regards to community building. In 1987, his seminal work, A Different Drum, he wrote about the issues of community. And there are 4 stages which Scott Peck talks about. The first one is pseudo-community. I'd like to read to you what he describes as pseudo-community. And again, there are 4 stages. This is the first stage that he describes of community. During this stage, the group pretends, and that's a key word here, pretends, that it already is a community and that differences do not exist. The decision-making process and the nature of relationships goes unchallenged, and politically correct or polite behavior dominates. It's quite interesting. That's what he calls pseudo-community. During this stage, the group pretends that it already is a community and that differences do not exist. Let's move to the next stage. Chaos. The sense of apparent control and order is disrupted when differences emerge. The group tries to obliterate these individual differences by polarizing topics, looking for winners and losers, or changing each other. Replication and duplication of what has worked in the past is mandated, and decisions are made via competition, political power, and authoritarian control. Now, I know many of you would be honest with me right now, would begin to feel and describe things that might be going on in your community as we read these words here about where, in fact, your community might be right now. The third stage, which is quite interesting, emptiness, he calls this. Having failed to control or organize its way into community, the group steps into true chaos. Uncertainty and ambiguity replace control. The group begins the work of self-examination, giving up personal obstacles, barriers, and agendas. It is the beginning of true listening and dialogue where the group's decision-making process becomes collaborative. And the 4th stage is what he calls community. Having emptied itself of its previous mental models, the group is available for authentic communication. Authentic connection is achieved by acknowledging differences. In this safe place, creativity emerges. The group as a whole makes decisions co-creatively, learns as an entity, and innovates as a whole. Now, I feel that it is important to lay this groundwork because I'm going to ask you the following kind of diagnostic questions right now that I'd like you to reflect on with regards to your community, where you are right now, and where you practice and worship with the Ascended Masters and your brothers and sisters that you see in your local area. These are questions that are simply defined as Scott Peck looks at what are the attributes and systems that lead to good and true community. The first question is the following. Is your organization moving toward greater inclusivity of information, people, and ideas? Now I want you to really listen to the question and think about this again in context of where you are in your local communities. A second question is your organization sharing power effectively, becoming more consensual and democratic? A third, at the organizational level, is the community becoming more capable of contemplative learning? Fourth, is the organization a safe place, a practice field for exploring each person's full potential? And I love the next one of how he states this. Can the group fight gracefully? Is the group moving toward or away from becoming a group of all leaders? In a moment we're going to explore that because this is the concept of servant leader. In fact, a true community does not have some known visible leader leading its group. It's that all the people have taken the accountability of leadership because they serve each other. And finally, which I think is more important, is really the bottom line, and that is there a spirit of community or connectedness? Because you know, if you can't feel it, it's not there. Do you know what I'm saying? It's like you walk into a room or you meet somebody the first time. It's, what am I feeling here? Is there some energy? Is there some, what's happening? And this is very true to a community. And the thing that Gilbert and I have noticed in many of the communities that we've gone out to speak with and talk about, they're very good intents to have us come out. In fact, one community said, "Come out. We're ready to do our mission statement. We got to have you. We need our mission statement because we have to build a church." Well, I said, "Hey, great. Well, they've asked, and we're going to go, and we're going to try to help because they've put forth their best foot and requested for some help." And we went to the meeting, and you know, building a mission statement is not an easy thing because that mission statement really needs to be the mission and the shared vision of every community member that's part of that community. They need a chance to express and be part of the energy, the collective thinking that goes along with these mission statements. Well, we were told that absolutely there's no problem, that the community is doing okay, we're ready for the mission statement, they've said it, we're ready to walk in. And needless to say, I was somewhat taken back, substantially walking into that situation. Because not only were they not even ready to discuss the mission, they had difficulty in really healing the divisions that were going on in their community. So Gilbert and I thought about this and we said, whoa, there's no way we're gonna walk into this mission statement because there's too much going on, there's too much healing that needs to take place in these communities. There was a sense of us and them between the board and the trustees and the community itself. And again, I say sense because there's perception is a very powerful thing. In reality, it might be something else, but there's this general sense that things were going on. So what we decided to do is said, hey, you know what? We've got to really just figure out where these people are because they do not look like they're ready to talk about something that's going to impact their community for the next decade or so. And we got together and we said, look, let's sit down as a community and we'd like you to do three things. Tell us what you're mad about, tell us what you're sad about, and tell us what you're happy about. And we had this, we broke the community up, and they came back, and what was pretty dramatic in our eyes as far as information and feedback goes, they voted. There were like 60 issues that they brought up. And I have to say that there was a lot of happies and there were a lot of glads about the community and the masters, etc. But there was a whole heck of a lot of issues sitting over there in the mads and sad category. And we asked them to rank for us what they felt were the top issues in that community. What did they see and what would they vote on as a collective community as to the issues that were going on? The number one issue, the number one, and then we had points on all this stuff. You know, you assign points and prioritize, and you got to start to really think about this. What was very clear that floated to the very top, it had something like 260 points or whatever it was, and the next one below that was like 90. I mean, so you could see the segmentation there based on the voting. The top issue was dialogue. The top issue was, you know what, we're not being heard. We're not even communicating with each other. It's painful. We're not really together as a community. We don't know what to do, but we've got to figure out how to communicate better. And this was an eye-opener for me to a large degree because I've been somewhat insulated. I haven't really been engaged in the field to a large degree. I have spent time in the study groups in Denver, in working in my consulting practice. I've spent time in Portland, Seattle. I lived at the Minneapolis Teaching Center for years. Didn't see that kind of problem in the early 80s, but I think since the early 90s, something has been happening in our communities. So Gilbert and I had a very interesting journey, if you would, with that community to really try to figure out where they were and where they were going. And as you can see, as you answer some of these questions, it's important to really take a good hard look of what's going on. What scares me now is we had 3 more communities call us up and say, hey, please come out, we're ready. We're ready to do the mission to vision. And a lot of excitement, enthusiasm from the leadership. Yeah, we're ready, we got our act together. And Gilbert and I felt that we better seriously look at what we're doing and really provide a framework for moving forward and growing, healing, and dealing with this issue that we see across the country. Now, in order to do that, I'd like to move forward and talk to you about what is it that we're moving towards and what are we moving away from. As you can see up here, in our new beginnings, I'm going to share with you what are we trying to leave behind? Because if you have to look at the old order and the old ways, remember Jesus said there's new ways and we have to understand what the old ways are. If we don't know what the old ways are, it's kind of hard. You might take it with you. So if you don't begin to identify these things, they're going to stay with you. So let's look at some of these. First of all, in the old way, we're going to call this the closed system. Well, what would be a new beginning? A new beginning would be an open system. And what we're talking about here is a shift to sharing information, inquiry, and feedback. In other words, we want to open up our hearts, our thoughts, to really collectively engage everybody in our community. Because it is only truly through our togetherness and our connectedness that we're going to solve the problems of this community so that we can move on to really solve the problems that the Ascended Masters have given us to solve in society. The second issue that we need to deal with is that there's been a basic myth that people the staff at headquarters, because they have given up their lives working for small wages, somehow are a little bit better than those in the field. And it's a myth that was very hard for many staff to grapple with, but is in fact an underlying issue that we need to understand. And some people in the field gave us that idolatry to a certain degree, that somehow we were the experts. We were close to Mother. You know, we were in the know. Things were going on, you know. And this idea that headquarters staff are experts really needs to be looked at. And so what would be a new beginning in this area? The new beginning is that members have expertise. That there is something in everybody. There is an inner wisdom that you and you alone provide into this community that is your personal uniqueness. It is part of your divine plan to provide some uniqueness into this community because you are special. You are the snowflake. So what we're leaning towards here then is the whole is greater than the sum of the parts. And what this is a shift to really ascended mastermind alliances. And again, here's where we have the teaching, but how much have we really put into practical use? The whole concept of the ascended mastermind alliance. If we were just to tap that alone, think of what we could do and create in a partnership with the Ascended Masters and as a partnership in each one of us in our communities. Now let's look at a few more because this is a long list, but it's important that we walk through this to understand this. Another issue is that status determines the value of your contribution. This is a hard one for some people. I'm the leader of such and such group. I've paid my dues. I've been blessed by headquarters with the mantle of leadership. You're to listen to me. You know, unquestioning obedience. It's Chilaship. Okay? What we want to move to, rather than having some status determine the value, is that meaningful contributions come from everyone. In other words, the shift is you are the church. You are accountable now as a body, as a light bearer, as part of this body and this movement, to make things happen, to be proactive. Another issue is monitoring. Some of you have heard about this, and many of those who have been around for years understand what I'm talking about. So-and-so did this, so-and-so's eating chocolate, so-and-so's wearing red socks. There's got to be something wrong with them. Let's fix them. Let's fix them. We love to fix people. You know, remember pseudo-community is you like to try to fix people and bury everything else because you don't really deal with genuine and authentic communication. Well, we really need to understand this issue of monitoring because it's somewhat endemic and it's just happened. This is not something, by the way, that Mother has instituted or ever talked about, ever preached, or ever taught, ever. This is one of the things in community you call unconscious rules and assumptions that emerge out of something that has happened in our culture that has led us to this. And in fact, in a meeting with Mother a couple weeks ago, she looked at me and she said, well, whatever you do, just make sure you tell people I'm through and I'm sick and tired of people telling people what to do and what not to do. The do's and don'ts have to leave. And I think you heard that last night from Mother as she talked about the 3 souls in this community that have moved forward, and they move forward despite any rules or policies or issues of discipline and made their ascension in this life. You know, this is really an important message I think we need to understand. The person that we need to fix is right in here. Let's begin to first focus on ourselves. So the new beginning for monitoring is one that we are going to explore in depth in the coming year, and it's the concept of mentoring for self-mastery. This is the role of a servant leader, is to help unlock the potential of the souls that you serve and you're around, that they can actually fulfill their divine plan, and help them on the path as a coach. And what this is a shift to the servant leadership. It's a new term for many of us, but we are going to study this, we're going to read about it, and we're going to be trained and educated until we truly understand what this is. And in a moment, I will also have some very exciting teaching from the masters on this. Another old issue that we're going to have to walk away from is what I'm calling limited local participation. The new beginning for this, and I'll describe what the old is by describing the new, is all participants in the organization contribute to the direction and fulfillment of the mission. And what this is really, and it is truly, a major shift of accountability. This accountability is going to come in many ways in the next year. We are going to essentially redo and restructure both the definition of church in the field, how leadership is selected and put in place in the field. We have to move to the empowerment stage, which allows accountability and responsibility to be in sync. And there are many ways and there are many issues that we can deal with this. But it's this shift of accountability that, hey, you are the ones that make the difference. You should have a lot to say about what goes on, because accountability and responsibility need to go together. But if you don't participate fully in those decisions, you're not as bought in, are you? You know, you don't have the sense of ownership unless you are actually having some heartfelt connection in the direction and the issues that you're dealing with in your communities. Another issue that we're going to be looking at is moving away from exclusiveness. Now, it's quite interesting. When the elders group a couple years ago, or it was about a year and a half ago, we went through and tried to identify some of these myths that are really, you know, have become part of us, and again, unconsciously. And to a certain degree, I will go back to some of the teaching on this. And even though the teaching doesn't mean this, but this is where we thought that this came from, and is that we are a called out and chosen people. And some people begin to say, well, I'm better than you because I'm called out, I'm chosen. God came here, he gave me the teaching, and I'm now somewhat I'm chosen. I've got a little bit of sense of, opportunity here to be better than some others who are not chosen, right? And this exclusiveness has been problematical for us, because this is why we like to fix people. If you're not, to be chosen, you got to do the following things. And we need to realize that I think, honestly, and you'll see in a minute when I share with you the definitive research that we have found about 44 million people who are waiting for the teachings of the Ascended Masters, what they are looking for. And I can tell you, this is one thing that they will not tolerate. They absolutely will not tolerate exclusivity and a sense of arrogance that might go with this in some way that you might feel about yourself just because you have arrived, because you have the teachings. And what we have to move towards in this new paradigm is inclusiveness. And what this means is that we need to shift to being open to diversity, open to differences of opinion that are different than ours, and a lot more compassion. A lot more compassion. Because there are people that are in deep pain. They may not have the full truth, they may not understand things, but there are morsels of truth that if we just have a little compassion, we could grow that universal fellowship affiliation in our church in such a major way that it's astounding if you really thought about it. So this compassion has to grow, and it's going to come from each one of us gaining this self-mastery as we move forward. I have to share the story with you because yesterday in my workshop, after the workshop in dialogue, brand new soul walked up to me. I don't know if he's here, but Jose from Dallas, I remember his name. He said, I'm brand new, and you're saying stuff that absolutely just rings true with my soul, but I have to tell you something. I was raised in my my religious upbringing. I'm having a problem. I said, well, what is it? I'm like, my ears are like going out like this right now, trying to just really listen to where this soul is coming from. And He says, you know, I was raised to believe that there is really only one God. I don't understand the concept of many masters, or how could there be so many beings that in fact have this capacity to be gods, if you would. And I'll tell you, my heart just, it overcame me a little bit. And here's such a very simple, fundamental issue going on with his soul, but he sees the truth. He feels it. He understands the teaching. He can see the value of what's going on there. And, you know, probably in years past, I would have probably got into a debate with the individual about there is not just one God, and it had gone into it with the idea that I might be trying to fix him or convince him otherwise. And I think this is an example. It was an example for me to go into my heart just to honor where he is right now. To understand that God will, if he can see the truth and he can feel the love in this community, God will take care of those other issues. And his understanding about life, about what is the one true God, because there is one true God. But as we understand, there's the Tao of that also. And so I'm happy to share that with you because it rang home to me even yesterday. And moving on into another area, in old, mother and headquarters staff are the decision makers. Again, I see this is one that's going to be difficult for some people to move forward with because to a certain degree there's been an idolatry that has been developed about mother, about staff, you know, this patine of expertise, and if this is where it's happening, this must be the right direction, and if this is what's going on, come hell or high water, this is what's got to happen in my local community. And what we want to talk about here is a shift to what I'm calling deep democracy. This deep democracy is really a shift to local decision making based on our principles and values. Now, if we can do this, guess what? We don't need rules, we don't need policies. This is the paradox of where we're moving towards, is that ultimately there should be no rules and no policies that govern us. We should be driven by the internalization of the principles and values that found and are the foundation of this organization. Now, I admonish many of you to maybe look at the Principles and Values Handbook. Some of the comments I got, oh, it's great, it's, you know, morbid fuzzy, I love all these terms. Yeah, this is right. But what have you done about it? Have you tried to look at where maybe some gaps in your own life that you could actually be better in terms of internalizing principles and values? Because if we commit to that alone, we will change what's going on, and we will need less and less rules and policies and regulations in the new organization. And there's many people in the business world that are trying to do this, by the way. They don't know how to get there because guess what? They don't have the spiritualization. As Mother said, they do not have the spirit capacity to actually do what we can do as a community, because we do have principles and values that are based on spiritual precepts and all the teachings of all time. So it's important to realize that we're shifting to an organization that really does not want rules and regulations. We want people guided by the internal fire of their principles and values, guided with integrity to make the right decisions at the right time when they need to make those decisions. Another issue is that mother and headquarters staff does the doing and they give all the permissions for what's going on. And without that, it must not be sanctioned. And what we're moving to is thinking and doing across the worldwide organization. And what this shift is all about in the New Beginnings is a shift to empowerment and risk-taking. I can witness to you at headquarters, this is very difficult. Because in the past, sometimes risk-taking had too much of a heavy penalty that went along with this. Some of you know what I'm talking about. when wrong decision might, it just, once you feel it one time, the second time you get a little bit more reticent about how much risk you really want to take to move forward. And what we really want to do is to be more open, because really the best learning organization, the best learning community is one that is making more mistakes than it has successes, because it's through the mistakes that you build your successes. You try. You go out, you do something. The things that we're talking about today, when you see in a minute about community building, this is simply a very simple, humble beginning. We've got to try, we've got to experiment as a community as to how we're going to build and spiritualize this movement throughout the world. But we're going to learn going through this, because one, I don't have any magic formula. There's no step way that is going to do this, because basically the solution lies within all of us as to how this is going to occur. That is the beauty of working together. And the last one is that we are connected and must cooperate. Now, quite interesting. You would say, wow, that's an old thing? That's something we want to, what's going on here? That sounds okay. We're connected and we need to cooperate. But as Gilbert talked about, that what we see, and I see as God transcending himself in a new day, in a new age, what we would like to move towards is to really understand that we are one and we choose to co-create. That we really do identify and understand that we are the divine emanation of heaven, of God, and that together as one, we choose to create our community and our destiny. But we need each other. The profound aspect of my dream was the fact that, number one, this new heaven and this new earth that I was feeling and crying over in joy that I could experience was not because I was with the thing. It was because we were all together and had, in fact, generated the solution that God manifested because we worked as a community. So this sums up essentially what I'm talking about with regards to moving from the old to the new. You've got to identify this stuff. You've got to think about it. You've got to recognize it, process it, and realize, are you going to make a philosophical break with things in the past that worked for 20 years possibly? They worked for us. They got us to where we are today by the grace of God. But we're moving in a new direction. We're moving with the pulsations of the Aquarian age. We're moving with these pulsations that are absolutely critical. God is moving on. He is not waiting. Are we going to seize the moment and seize the new opportunity, to seize the new consciousness that is required of us to come up higher? As Archangel Michael said, are you standing still? Because we're moving. And here's a very sobering thought. If we don't move as a community, and we are now accountable because we can see what's going on. And we know what we can do to attract 500 million light bearers. But if we don't act and we don't do those things that are going to attract and these new seekers and fulfill what the masters are desiring for this earth, we will have failed because we didn't seize the moment. We did not seize the opportunity in the day of our destiny to move forward. Now, let's talk a little bit about some other startling revelations that my team and Gilbert and the board have been seeing in the last couple months. And it deals with what you told us and what we're also seeing from what we're calling the light bearers. You know, the thing that we've had problems with at the headquarters is, can somebody please tell me what the zip code is for the light bearers? Because I'd like to send them a letter, invite them to come over, and try to get to them. You know, it's people. You know, these are real people, these light bearers. It's not some mythical body that just hangs out there. They actually are walking around and have jobs and are raising families and are seeking spiritual things. How do we find out where these people are? What do they do? What do they believe in? What are their values? What are their needs right now? Not what their needs were 20 years ago, because things have changed, folks, to a large degree. There's some very significant things going on in society right now, and those spiritual seekers are needing certain things that they're looking for. You heard from Deborah, you know, to pay $600,000, they have this one-on-one relationship with God. My God, we got it. I mean, all we have to do is package this thing. I want to speak about a quote from the Roerich Teachings, which I think is very powerful. It's in the book New Age Community. How many of you have actually read that? You got to get this book. I mean, it's incredible. And what the Roerich said here is the community as fellowship can unprecedentedly accelerate the evolution of the planet. And it caught me for a moment in thinking, my God, this new universal fellowship level of affiliation, if we were able to just to do that right by itself, there's no pledges, there's no requirements to be part of this affiliation, we can change things very quickly. And then moving forward, there's been a question that Gilbert and the board have been asked over and over. It comes up. It burdens me like you can't believe, but I want to talk about it for a minute. And that is, how does all this stuff with re-energizing, re-engineering, all these terms, tell me how this has to do with anything with regards to the spiritual teachings? And I can honestly tell you that in all the research that I see and everything that I read about people who are developing community, looking at community, that community building is in fact a truly and fundamentally powerful, profound spiritual process. Because true community is built on the capacity for each one to be compassionate, to work with others, to live with others, to love and grow as a community. And I can tell you that every day I pray on my hands and knees to God, El Moria, give me the understanding of what it takes to spiritualize everything we're doing. And he gave this admonishment way back in the early beginnings. Many of you remember the dictation. He said, make sure you thread spiritualization throughout everything that you do. And I have never forgotten that. And it's something that we at headquarters continually look at in everything that we do. But there are two issues here that I want to just bring up real quickly that others have collaborated on with regards to how is this community building and spirituality related. First one is, when a group seeks to learn as a community, it simultaneously seeks psychological and spiritual growth for the organization. Community building is a process of learning and spiritual growth. You can't disconnect it. And these are some of the best minds embodied right now that are saying this, that understand this phenomenon. And the second point here is that such learning is a lifelong task, beginning with the organization's birth and continuing throughout its life cycle. So what begins to happen is we see, and you go back to Scott Peck, that the stages of growth from pseudo-community, where we pretend that we're a good community, but it's all surface. There's no real deep, authentic communication, one-on-one bonding going on with us with a lot of spiritual connection, which is true community, that we have to continually sustain and grow to stay in this level of true community. You just don't get there and it sustains itself. You actually have to have self-mastery and practice to keep it alive. So, and in fact, the process of community building, I believe, is truly and fundamentally spiritual. Now, let's move on with the issue of research and what our members are asking us. We held a meeting and held quite a bit of dialogue on this, both qualitatively and quantitatively. And what many people in our community, our members right now, have told us that what we need is training programs for leadership, management, teamwork, and how to deal with conflict. Now, for myself, when I went to Livingston and a few other communities, I never realized how important at least number 3 was. Because to a large degree, we are, we have to admit that we really need better facilitation skills in dealing with conflict as part of our community building. So in essence, we looked at this and we said, wow, this is really, these words mean something. And we have to think about this, because if this is the top priorities coming from our communities, what are we going to do about this? Because I'm asking myself the question, what has the organization done in the last 5 years to actually do any of this? And unfortunately, the answer is a big fat zero. The big one. It is something that we have to sit up and take note of and think about how we were going to do this. Now, you have to remember, at Ranch, it's quite amazing, because we got a lot of projects going on. And part of our going from the old to the new is that we actually have to start doing different things. And that's very hard, because we love doing the old things. We know how to do it very well. But we actually have to set up entirely new systems. We have to have new competencies. We have to have new programs. And we have to have new resources to do things that we've never done before. And this is one of them. Now, let's move to the next one, which I actually believe is critical. What I'm going to share with you right now is the research about what are these light bearers looking at. What have they said, and what do they want right now? What can we do that will attract and provide a need and a benefit for these people? You heard Murray, you heard Gilbert talk about this group. They've been categorized, if you would, as cultural creatives. This is a group of people that statistically in numbers about 44 million. Now, for those of you who are in marketing and all this stuff, that's a big number. That's a big number. The 44 million have some very specific issues and values. What I'd like to share with you are some of these that they have expressed. Number one, this is, in fact, their top number one issue that 92% of that group fully agree with. In other words, there is little dissension about this issue in this group of cultural creatives who are actually looking for spiritual community and belonging to some spiritual group. They need and they want to look at the issue of rebuilding neighborhoods and communities for sustainability. Now, those words, every word up there is important, because sustainability to me is a key one. In other words, this is a group of people who understand that what we do today is building the foundation for the generation to come and our children that we are trying to raise right now. And if we don't do something about it, they're going to inherit something that isn't going to be as good as it could be if they were to take action. So these cultural creatives are people that want to transform society. They are not couch potatoes. In fact, they do not like TV. They actually have a major distrust of TV. This is the group who buys books to a large degree. Secondly, an issue that they came up with, second most important, creating and maintaining caring relationships of all kinds, friends, family, etc. Creating and maintaining caring relationships. The other phenomena that Gilbert and I have seen and have talked about that really burdens us is the following. Brand new people walk into a teaching center, a local group. They're on fire. They found the teachings. They read a book in Barnes & Noble, and they know that they have uncovered something that's deep. They walk into the local church community, and the level or the experience that they have moves them to walk out the back door as they walk in the front door. This is a sad commentary on what is going on at the local level. What are we doing that is simply as allowing that person to walk out the back door? Are we being compassionate enough? What's going on? What are the structures? What are the systems? What are the rules? What is going on that that person is walking out of that community? Brand new. And I hear it, listening in your table. Hey, you know, I love the Masters. I come only to the conferences, but I can't stand to go to my local community. That hurts beyond, I just can't tell you how much that hurts. You know, we have to figure out what's going on so that these people stay and participate. They have something to offer us. In fact, they're the ones that are probably going to help us change. Because remember Jesus saying, you know, the last shall be first and the first shall be last. And the last that are coming in probably have a lot more attainment probably than us that had to be around here for 10, 20 years to work through these things. We have to learn from them. We have to look at the opportunity that these new souls are bringing us. And it's an issue that really has got to be nailed, because our growth right now is not healthy. Another issue that they brought up and in this caring relationships is the fact that they want to make a contribution to society. They are there to help others, period. This group has already been through inner child work. They've worked on themselves. They've been through Deepak Chopra. They've been on Wayne Dyer. They have read all that stuff. This is what they've been doing for 20 years. Been there, done that. And I've learned that the only way that you can love is by serving others and getting involved and being altruistic. Staying home, doing my thing, and doing my meditation is not where it's happening. They have come to the point in self-actualization to realize that the more I give, the more love that actually comes to me, because I'm serving, because I've actually figured it out, that we are one. And the more I do for others, it comes back tenfold. So I've got out of my cocoon, I've gotten off the couch potato, I've gotten away from being so focused on myself that I want a community that's out there serving others, that's got a mission to help deal with issues in our society, help growing others as the main focus of what's going on. And I submit to you that this is the balance that we have to have in our communities. It was another burden for me to hear a story about a young woman who recently was in a teaching center. She wanted to do some hospice work. And Gilbert and I were in earshot of this conversation that was going on. The leader of the community, standing right there, telling this person, well, you know, you can't do this on Tuesday nights. You know, this is El Moria's night for decrees. How can you possibly be so selfish to go do hospice work on the night that El Moria needs you for decrees? Now, I'll tell you, I'm glad I was about 10 feet away from this situation, because I probably would have, said some words that have been a little bit off balance. But here was a soul who was so fired up about hospice work, and that it was her mission and her life calling. And yet the unwritten rule here was that, you got to be sitting in your seat in this teaching center, paying your dues. And the tone of that conversation, it still rubs me, to be quite honest. But here I'm trying to bring up again, the people that want to come into community, they want to be out there serving. They want to be in action. They've got to be doing things. Now again, the teachings is we've got to help them understand that if you did just a little bit of prayer work, a little bit of violet flame, you can do 30 times more when you're out there doing the action and serving and feeling the love. There's a balance that we have to understand here that will heighten things as we move forward. What are you going to do about abortion? Yes, prayer is one thing, but you also have to do some other things that can help these issues. But you have to physically do it. Maybe it's writing a letter. Maybe it's going to talk to your senator. There's things that you have to do to balance this. Moving on. Another thing that this group is interested in, and we've got it, we have all this, is they want to understand religious mysteries. My God, we have the esoteric teachings of all the 7 major religions. It's here. The founders of those religions are giving us our teachings now. They are, in fact, the true essence of the teachings. And the last one, there are actually more, but I'm giving you the top. These are the top issues that these souls of light, these light bearers that we have called them, have articulated as far as what is important for them in their lives. And the last one is they are looking for people that are self-actualized. Because remember, they've been through the inner child stuff. They've worked on themselves. They've meditated for 20 years. They've been through every diet possibly known to the New Age. And they've come to the realization that it all doesn't matter. It's only what I do to grow my heart, to serve others, and love to heal society. They have a sense of wanting people that feel that they have a personal uniqueness, that they understand their divinity. And the last thing is, they actually have a desire to belong to a spiritual group. Now, can you imagine any better group of people that we would want to actually go out and meet and talk with? There it is. We actually have everything in our grasp to offer to this market and to these people. What we have to figure out as a community is how are we going to package us, our community, our connectedness, and everything that we do to provide the open door for these people that are out there, that need the Master's teachings. They're at the right place in consciousness. They have the right attitude and understanding. We have it all. So I wanted to highlight this in terms of understanding our new beginnings, because we've got to focus on this to become more inclusive of these new people and their needs. Now, we looked at all that and we said, my God, you heard Gilbert say yesterday that we actually figured out that we had to change a number of strategies in our organization and raise them to the top of the pack in terms of priorities and issues that we had to deal with as an organization. So we came up with the following goal. Many of you have seen this, but I'm bringing it back to your forefront because we are committed to this 100%. To provide training to teaching centers and study groups in community building, leadership, management, teamwork, and personal growth. And this is in the organizational plan. It's got a target date of April 30th, 1998. Now, as we move on, I'd like to share with you this issue about training. And I'm going to highlight the Goddess of Liberty quote that she gave us literally just a few months ago. She says, "Understand that when you have skilled individuals who see the future, who are indeed futurists, you are coming across a group of souls who are unusual, who are highly sensitive, who know exactly what must be done. And if they do not know, they train and train and train until they do understand. As a result of this, beloved, you are seeing this new paradigm and a total change in how the outlook of the organization truly is." And again, these quotes and these teachings that come in the midst of what we're doing are just so rich with light and understanding. Skilled individuals who see the future. And she says, look, this just, you actually go out and get training. You need some skill to develop the new community, the new organization that you're doing. This just isn't going to happen by some circumstance. Or, again, the myth that we began to look at the church, and this was, we go to the inner retreats at night. That's all we need to do, right? Underlying myths that sometimes for some people are pretty powerful. There are things that we need to do down here to make sure that whatever we're getting up in the inner retreats and in the inner schools, we can actually bring down here. And sometimes you need training to do that. And it takes discipline and it takes mastery in many of these areas. Now, in order to do this, and why the significance of this quote is for the following overhead that I'm going to share with you. And I'm going to step over here because I'm going to need to point to you or point out some things on this graph that I think are important. Number one, the letter last night, by the way, from Teresa Harvey was just incredible. The issue of changes, the issue of pain being the ultimate joy of moving forth in the change, that we have to go through this. What this overhead illustrates here, that if we are to grow and mature as a community over time on this axis, there are some things that we're going to encounter. Number one, as we speak, this moment, the paradigm is shifting. There's a new way of thinking. There are new values. There are new principles that this organization will be running itself on. By the grace of God, your input and your heart flame, we will be moving forward. Now you see this little thing here. This is time. This is the end and the beginning. Right here. You see, when time is 0, this is where the graph is. You see that point right there? Everybody? Okay. What's happening there? Is growth going up or down? Down. There's actually a well-known phenomenon that when there are radical shifts or quantum leaps in thinking and new ways of doing things, that in general, things are going to get a little messy at first. Things are going to be painful. Things are going to be a little challenging for us to really begin to think in a new way and to do things differently as an organization. Now, what happens here is that you begin to see the rise up. In other words, you get through the neutral zone and you begin to understanding, my gosh, there's some power in this stuff. If we did this, we got together and we put our hearts together and our resources, we can make a significant difference. Now, the key thing on this overhead, though, is coming up here, which is very important. So we have the basic shift to a thinking of wholeness and understanding. What we begin to see here is that we can grow as an organization, but there's going to come a point that just thinking about this and studying our principles and values is only going to get us so far. What's going to begin to happen is that if we don't begin to practice new skills that the Goddess of Liberty is talking about and train and train and train until we understand them, we will go back into another decline. And that's why you see the dotted lines here going down. And this is why spiritual community building is, in fact, a lifelong process. Then again, if you don't continue the practice and the mastery of the skills that you need in community building, you can get to another level, and you might do a lot, and you're growing more because you're maturing. But if you then don't look to the next changes, the inflection points that you need to internalize in the community, you can fail again. And this is why Scott Peck says this process is ongoing. You have to be vigilant. And ultimately, what we want to do is to be able to operate in this higher domain, because if we're actually embodying true community here because we have the discipline and the mastery, we can do a lot more for others because we're working together. We have the common bond, the shared vision, and moving forward. So the stages of maturing in a community have some very significant implications for us. We've got a journey that's just starting, and we've got a lot to do and a lot of maintenance that we have to keep up with in order to move forward in the new millennia. Now let's talk about the new initiative that we're here today to talk about. The purpose of our new initiative is the following: to facilitate and nurture the growth of local spiritual communities for the worldwide expansion of Church Universal and Triumphant. That is, in essence, the mission statement, if you would, of why we are here today and proposing to you this particular initiative. Now, last night, you saw for the first time the proposed levels of affiliation for the church. And I know for many of you, you don't remember two-thirds of what was said, because this is what happens when there's radical shifts in thinking and new models. You start to selectively filter, you forget things that you don't want to remember, and these things kind of happen. And I have seen this over the last year, even with my own team. And we'd have three meetings where we train on this one particular subject, and 4 months later they go, you know, we never had training on this. And I realized that it was a very substantive issue that had to require them to change. And what they did is they just erased that, because that was a very difficult time for them to begin to understand a new way of being a team member. Same thing is going to happen with us. We're going to have to revisit this. We want you to think about it. This is why we need your help, because you need to really process some of this. But one thing I'd like to point out to you that is going to be absolutely key in our growth and our development has to focus right here in this quadrant, which is the community service quadrant. Do you remember what Deborah said about this particular area of affiliation? This is where members of our community who want to serve the community, whether it be hospice, whether it be decree leading, whether it be doing audio AV, whether it be giving a lecture, this is the key to the growth of this segment of membership, and certainly this to a certain degree. But our capacity to build a solid community and grow will be how well does this group of people who affiliate in community service internalize the new beginnings. Walk the talk, if you would. You heard that expression? You know, and some of the letters that Gilbert and I are receiving are like, you know, there's a lot of talking and no walking going on. And to a certain degree, you're right. But you know something? There are a lot of people that simply need training. They're not out there with malicious intent to sabotage where we're going. Give them a break. Give our leaders a break. You know, our leaders that are in the field right now, I tell you, God bless them, because in the last year, I have never seen, I finally figured out what was going on. And one is, they're building and have built our organization, literally trying to make bricks without straw, almost zero resources, and have done what they have done. They've done that raising a family, having a professional job, and dedicating whatever free time they have left to build and nurture our local communities. It's unbelievable. I mean, I just stand back in awe that they have done this on their free time. We have literally almost no full-time resource in the field growing our church. Do you realize that? It has all been on true, total volunteer service. I just realized this a number of months ago, and I was just taken back. And that clapping should go on for 5 hours, honestly, because you know, it really is. And I truly give honor and deference, and I'm humbled before the hard work and sacrifice of the dedicated souls that have gotten us here. And these are the people that are crying out, we need help, we need training, we need some resources, we need some full-time people to help us out, whether it's outreach or some secretarial work to keep the books up or things like that. We at headquarters have to figure out how we're going to do this and work with you in a partnership to crack that egg and make this happen, because if we can grow this at the local level, you're going to grow your local church membership, and you're going to provide a major opportunity for those that are looking for the path and looking for these teachings. So this initiative, to a large degree, is really dealing with some of the fundamental issues that need to go on in developing those that want to participate in this quadrant. And the number one skill and competency and training that they're going to need to have is, what is community building? What is it all about? How do you do it? How do I facilitate a discussion with 3 or 4 people? How do we come to closure and fundraising for a church or a chapel or a youth ministry program? There are a number of skills that are required in this quadrant that have to be internalized for us to be successful. It cannot be left to chance, and therefore it needs a specific system and initiative to make this work. Okay. Now the drum roll. What we have come up with, and I say we, and I truly honor the we that has been involved with this. There's been many hands and hearts and thinking that has gone into this, both at the ranch and friends and alliances and people that have been working with us on this, is a process that has a philosophy of empowering. We could have easily said, you know, we're going to spend $3 million and we're going to put 80 people out in the field, and they're going to go out and essentially fix your problems, and you have to take them. These are the people that are trained. You know, take them or leave them, but here they are, and approach it from a way that would not be in sync with our principles and values. In other words, accountability and responsibility. We had to figure out, wow, in the new day, in the new beginning, how would we structure something that's going to really fire up people, allow them the accountability, give them the responsibility for the change in their communities, and still make it work. And we play the role that we need to play, which is serving you. Not telling you what to do, or that you have to go build a church, or you have to hire a minister, or you have to do these things. What is it that your community needs? What is it that you, at the local level, are looking to do that you know that you need to do to impact the equation? So this is a beginning. It's not a perfect plan. It's here again for some refinements that we are going to make over the next 2 months, but it's a start. Phase 1. First of all, what you see here in the middle is we call community mentoring. And at the very center of this, we're calling this is a partnership. And you know, in a partnership, there's a mutual collaboration going on with what's happening. It isn't some, this is what's going to happen, this is what we're going to do to you. This is, hey, here's how we're going to work together, here's what we can do to make things work for you and your community. In phase one, what we are talking about, and I'm going to walk through these very carefully with you so you can understand what's happening here. I'm going to go through real quickly as an overview so you understand at least the general sense. As I said before, the community service quadrant in the new membership model is critical. If that element of people who have passion and desire, that want to serve community, that want to understand the new servant leadership model, that want to build new skills that help grow groups and families and institutions and whatever, we need to really wrestle with the first thing on the agenda, and that is leadership. Because you know, when new people come in the door, you can have all the nice principles and values in the handbook, but if you're actually doing something that's different than what's being said that we believe in, you know what they're going to believe in? It's not the principles and values. They're going to model your behavior. They're going to say, oh, that's what it really is. That's what it really is your action and your behavior. Now, you got a great principles and values, but I can see that you obviously believe something else. So what we have to do is to understand that we really need to get in and do substantial training and education and team building in this whole area called servant leadership. So this is, in essence, the beginning of phase one. Hold a second. I'd like to do right now, and this was, I'm actually going a little bit out of order, I would like to play an excerpt from Lanello, where he talks about community. And in fact, he talks about this phase and this issue head on. And I'd like to go ahead and play that excerpt for you right now.
So then, in the matter of organization, this is a church that is a citadel of freedom. Each one of you is church, a citadel of freedom. What is the fire in the midst of your citadel? Tend it, do not let it go out. Community is a very bad word in the circle of the fallen angels. They do not wish to see a community of light bearers succeed, for the community of the Buddha, the Sangha, the Buddha, and the Dharma present the equation of the equilateral triangle that is invincible, because it is a threefold flame. Wherever the communities have formed, round about the earth, on the surface, beneath the earth, on ancient continents and on other systems, the fallen ones have come from afar to snuff out that candle of community. Do you not realize, beloved hearts, that community is the answer to the problems of so many, of those in ghettos in every nation, and of the poor, and of those who can no longer afford to live in the cities of the world, much less in the country? Yes, beloved, why do they not form communities? Because, quite simply, they argue about who is boss. They cannot even get along with themselves or the members of their own households. How can they band together by the hundreds and then the thousands to form a community where arms are locked and a mighty mesh of armor as chainmail is formed by the living bodies of the Buddhas and Christed ones and Bodhisattvas and babes in arms, all who have the fire of God within them and submit to holy purpose, to the indwelling God, and therefore, because all see the same all-seeing eye of God, all see El Moria, all know at inner levels, what is the foundation and the bedrock of community, so the community is a strength multiplied, geometrized by the numbers within it, and by those of the hosts of the Lord who are enabled to step through the veil through you. You are not mere physical numbers. You are yourself, plus all of the angels and elementals and ascended masters who can work through you individually. Such is the multiplication of the community of the Holy Spirit.
Well, Nello, boy, who is boss? As you can see, he tuned right into it, and it's one of the issues that we need to understand, that if we look at the issue of servant leadership, it can truly and is the foundation of moving through a lot of our problems in our communities. Now, moving forward, I'd like to talk a little bit about phase 2 real quick, because again, we're going to walk through this. What does this mean? How is this going to work? What is this all about? In phase 2, we're talking about developing spiritual community capacity. In other words, right here, this is where the community is working together to build its mission, its plans, its goals, its strategies together. It isn't 3 or 4 people saying, this is what we're going to do, community, rally around it and move forward. This is the kind of phase where the community is collectively deciding its destiny. And it's done through a number of processes and collaboration that we're going to talk about in a minute. In the third phase, this is what we're going to then look at mobilizing community action. You can talk a long time about plans and goals and strategies, but you've got to get to a point where thought moves into action, right? And this is the phase, this is the return, if you would, on the clock, moving back to the 12 o'clock line, mobilizing community action. And to realize that this is where we've got to work together in a partnership to realize where are the resources, where are they going to come from, how can we partner, what are the needs, what are your priorities? Because out of phase 2, what you're going to say is, these are the priorities of my community. Whether it's a study group or a teaching center, those priorities might be a little bit different between each community. And in phase 4, we're calling this where we really need to look at sustaining our community. In other words, what are the true programs that are going to help us continue to grow and grow over time? For example, in phase 4, these are things where you've decided that the most important program or initiative that you have is that you need a physical church to come and worship, to provide the cradle for your growth. That's one thing. You might decide as a community that you might need a minister. You might need a full-time minister, and you've decided as a group that this is what you need, and these are the kinds of resources that we at church need to help provide and serve you with. Now let's move forward in talking about each one of these phases again. I first want to say that the foundation of this community obviously was built and still is continued to be built on individuals. In our second life cycle, we are the ones to make it happen. Mother and Mark started off, they were basically them and a very small group of people built this church. And through those individuals, there were formed more teams, and ultimately at the capstone of the triangleist community. And what you heard Lanello say in his excerpt, which I think is extremely profound, he brings in the concept of the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha. And for many of you who are passionate about Buddhism and the Eastern teachings, as I am, it's always interesting because, remember what Lanello said, it's this equilateral triangle. It's the threefold flame that is, in fact, the power and the foundation of community. So the Buddha we see as the teacher, the Dharma, the teaching. And where we need to spend a lot more time is in this third area. It's the all-seeing eye of God at the top of this triangle is the Sangha. And that is the application of teaching in community. We really have to begin to understand that. What is the Master's teaching on community? What can we do to grow this community to make sure that this equilateral triangle has the power and is the foundation that's invincible, that will move us forward into the new millennia? And this is what our community building program is all about. Now, the Goddess of Wisdom gave us another quote here before we talk about this phase 1 that I thought was extremely powerful. She gave this on July 1st, 1990. Thus, beloved, whether or not this Church Universal and Triumphant, including its branches in teaching centers and study groups, does continue to thrive and grow and to expand, depends on an enlightened leadership that is full of compassion and the Holy Spirit, and that is careful before the power and the authority that it is given, not to abuse it and not to crush new souls on the path. I pray that you pray for the leader within you to rise up and take dominion, and that you surrender to that leader and to that law and to that justice, which is absolute and unerring of your karmic condition. I pray that you study the profiles of many successful leaders in every field and the books and courses of those who are professional teachers in these subjects today on how to be a good leader, a good administrator, how to be the servant who humbly remembers at all times that he is actually the employee of the Christ, of the ones whom he must lead. To me, the Goddess of Wisdom is describing very clearly servant leadership. Would you agree? There's no ambiguity in what we're talking about, but do you see where she ties our growth and our survival into our ability to understand this concept of servant leadership? It's dramatic when you think about it, a single issue of this nature. Now, moving forward, again, in looking at where we are, you will see on this overhead something that somebody pointed out to me, by the way, when I was going through this. Oh, you got a mistake. You got a mistake. What's the mistake? And they said, oh, well, down here at the foundation of your community building process, the very foundation, what really guides us into the future are principles and values. Okay, you've seen the handbook, right? And we understand, wow, if we could internalize those principles, they are in fact what will guide us into the future. Every decision we make should be based on how integrated in sync is it with our principles and values. And then they saw this thing over here, culture of divine love. What's that? Well, that's not the same words. But I submit to you that it's one and the same. If you really truly meditate and understand that our principles and values, that if we outpicture those and we believe in those and we gear our behavior and our attitudes around, we in fact are building the culture of divine love. And as Saint Germain said, let this be known as a church of divine love. So what we have to do, and in this process that we're looking at, this is a lifelong process we're about to begin. This isn't an initiative that is going to start for 2 months and then end 3 months and think that you've arrived with community. This is what Deborah was talking about, that lifelong learning is in fact lifelong. And as we see this, as you understand the basic initiative we have here, is that we are trying to walk up and accelerate up the pyramid by looking at processes, what are the new skills that have to be mastered in the community. Because as we have more self-mastery, our community will grow as we begin to dive into each one of these phases that we're about to look at. So phase 1 is building local servant leadership. And what we're talking about here, and here's some goals that we have come up with regards to this. First, develop a servant leadership philosophy. 2, establish a committed body of servant leaders who have a strong sense of community in the culture of divine love. 3, facilitate implementing new membership structure and culture as a spiritual platform for growth. Now, I'm going to take just a quick moment on this last bullet to really indicate or talk about something that's extremely important. New membership is what Deborah talked about last night. But there is an entirely new structure that we must also design that goes along with that membership. And you'll be seeing more and more of this in the coming year, because we have to deal with structure and systems. We can talk servant leadership till we're blue in the face, but if our structure and systems don't facilitate the growth or support of community, all of this training will be for naught. So we have a major job in front of us that we're going to need your help on, and that is, how do we redefine our local communities? What is a church in the local community? We want to be more inclusive. We want to have the ability to have churches and have 501(c) status wherever we can get it based on the requirements that are required by law and what we can do, but we really need to restructure our systems in the field. How we elect leadership, how the decision making is made. A lot of that cannot take place right now because we're actually trapped in our existing bylaws and articles of incorporation. Do you realize that? And you've told us that too, believe me. And we realize that that is one big gorilla that we have to wrestle with in 1998. But I wanted to point that out to you specifically because we're very aware of that. Now in phase one, the process will look like the following. First of all, if we are invited and funds are committed to cover our expenses, I'm going to talk about this in a second, we will send community building facilitators to your city or town to assist and train your leaders and anyone interested in community building skills. There's a couple important words here I'd like to talk about. If we are invited. We feel that in the new day, in the new beginning, that it must be the entire community that has a desire to grow, a desire to heal, and they must come to a point of consensus that they would like to invite, help, trained, competent facilitators to come in to help this community building process. And that's what we mean by if we are invited. That there's a call from your community that says we need help, we want help, we love this training, we love this idea, can you come down and do whatever we can here? This is what we mean by being invited. We're not just going to make a program and just simply say we're coming, here's the date, accept it, we'll be there, get ready for us. That's the old way. That's the old day. We really want to build a partnership. We want to know that you have passion, that you're committed to build spiritual community. Because quite honestly, there are some communities right now that are not ready for it. They don't want it. There's a general consensus that things are okay where they are, and we don't want to get involved unless we can see the desire to understand what this vision is and what this community thing is all about. And the funds are committed to cover our expenses. What we're asking and saying is the following. We are willing to put up the people, the training, the workshops, the salary and the time in our partnership as part of our offering of resources to come out to your communities. But what we need help with are the expenses, the airfares, the food, the lodging, and that's all we're talking about, is really to meet our basic needs to have the capability of coming out to your community. And if this is so, we would like then, in the second part of the process, if there are funds committed, we're invited, we would come out over a 4-month period for 4 to 6 workshops to work with you and your community, those that are committed to change, those that are committed to this whole idea of spiritual community. We would love to come out and help you build your successful plans for your growth and facilitate, and will help us understand also what your needs are and gain a greater understanding of what's going on in the field by going through this process. Now, moving forward, the kinds of things that we would do in these workshops when we were out there would be the following. One, Deborah talked to you about this a little bit last night, is that we would like to go over what is this new Church Universal and Triumphant. When we realize that many people cannot articulate what we believe, what we practice, and what our faith is consistently with the same message, this is the kind of training that we would bring to the field. Is to really understand what is this message, what is our common vision, what is the communication that we share together. Secondly, the education and training would also be here, would be basically boot camp for servant leadership. You know, let's start at the beginning. Step one, square one. What is this thing? How do we go through this? And this is not a bunch of head-talking kind of workshops. We're going to get down and go for it. And for a lot of people, it's going to be a little bit painful, but it's going to be very exciting because the joy on the upside of this is phenomenal. The servant leadership basic training. Another area will be dealing with group facilitation. How do you run a community meeting? What are some of the basic things that can enrich the capacity of your community to come together, to think, create, and take action? And do it with as all compassion as you've ever experienced. Another area will be the art of dialogue. I've talked about this a little bit before, but this is really fundamental. If we don't know how to speak with each other, listen to each other, things will be marginalized as we move forward. And I remember that Livingston, this was the #1 issue for them. And I realize how important this is in our communications. And the last one is, we need some basic instruction again from the masters on what is compassion. How do we nurture new people? Because we need to understand that we have to give up some of the old myths and the old behaviors that we've had about fixing people that walk in the door for the first time. Okay, you know what? In universal fellowship, remember, there's no pledges, there's no requirements. What does that mean? I can smoke. In fact, I might be an alcoholic. But I have a desire to run and look and understand the teachings because I need some healing. And we've got people that are in pain that we need to pay attention to. And we need to figure out how are we going to deal and heal those light bearers and those souls that are looking for rest, they're looking for healing. You know, to come in and say, well, you're smoking and drinking, you can't possibly be part of our community. You know, there's an attitude that we really have to break here. So the outcome of all of this, you know, we've heard about outputs and outcomes, but essentially what we're looking for in this first phase is the following. We would like the involvement and ownership by the local community in helping build the culture of divine love. That's it. That's what this boils down to. All of this ritual and things that we would do and process the systems boils down to the fact that we really want to see local involvement. We want to see our brothers and sisters working together to rebuild our church and what we need to do with the action plans, etc., all founded on our principles and values and the culture of divine love. Phase 2. We've done phase 1, and if we've done our job from providing the facilitators, and we have demonstrated value to you, we would like to move forward to the next phase. And in this phase, what we would be doing, the goals would be building quality relationships through dialogue, learning, and trust, and other new skills. We'd like to establish strategies and goals that provide an environment for attracting new seekers. We need to figure that one out. What are we going to do? What initiatives? What can we do in the new day on a white piece of paper to attract these spiritual seekers? And finally, ultimately, phase 2 would manifest essentially a community action plan, a written document that has everybody's fingerprints on it, everybody's heartfelt discussion and ideas as to what are the priorities, what are the goals that you have as a community to move this church forward. You are the church. What are your priorities? What are your initiatives? We would like to see this as an outcome, as a document you can use to move forward in the coming years. The process in phase 2, as I said before, if you feel that you've benefited in phase 1 and you'd like to invite us back, we'd like to begin the journey for phase 2, where we will help facilitate in developing ultimately this community action plan with everyone who wants to learn and participate. And basically those are the requirements to move into this second phase. The desire to learn, the desire to participate. And we'll return then again for 5 to 6 more weekend workshops over a 6-month period. And the education, the training that would occur here would be, we would be looking at how to become an adept at change. You know, these transition processes are a lot easier if you understand the psychology and the issues that go along in your life when there are radical changes that are occurring. Secondly, we'd be looking at team building, be looking at participative decision-making skills, conflict management skills, understand the spiritual lifelong learning path, develop how to develop your mission, your vision, your goals, strategies, and action plans. Now, as you can see, developing your mission and vision, goals, and action plans, many of you want to move into that right now, but we're saying, wow, there's a whole bunch of stuff that you have to do to be really good at developing a mission with this collective collaboration and community. Now, the outcomes of Phase 2 are a practical action plan to work together for a common cause and shared vision. And I emphasize practical, because we really need to understand what are the things that we can do now. What do we have? What are other resources? What can we use to move forward? Secondly, a passionate and committed community to implement its goals, dreams, and plans. Remember we talked about when somebody walks into your community, what do they feel? What's the energy that I feel in my community? And what we need to have is people that walk in that feel compassion as well as passion. And boy, I tell you, when you get passionate people together, things can change and things can move. And by the way, 5 people who are highly passionate, I would love to take, if I had to form a team, I would take 5 passionate people over 20 marginally committed people to get something done. Because I've seen what 5 passionate people can do. I've seen what 1 passionate person can do. I saw what Mother Teresa did when she walked out of the convent and said, without any money, and built that organization for 30 years. I think she had 1 rupee or whatever it was when she walked out. But she knew what she had to do. She had passion, and she committed everybody that came around her to her mission in serving others. Growth and